Frozen in this moment, the last, and I know it. Think about the winners with hands with the coldest. Think about handout, shit, you're still growing. Think about the world, how we didn't even notice.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you had a great day today. We're going live again. We're going live with one of the most fascinating people that I am so delighted to have met in my years of traveling along the hotel and wedding and brides and all those nice things journey. A very special guy, a very intelligent guy. One of the scariest people I know because he scared the life out of me the very first time I met him. But he's grown on me, or else I've grown on him, one or the other. We have the fantastic Fionbarr Walsh. You may know him. Excuse me, he's been around a long time. He's on his bike cycling to and from everywhere, and locally you might know him. He was the GM of the Maritime Hotel for a few years as well. We won't say how long because that'll only poke out what age he is, but he was there for a few years, and he was scaring me all the time I went to weddings, and he always made sure I took up my gear the next day or else that night because I wouldn't annoy him because he scared me. But I'm going to be fantastically joined. It's going to be great fun talking to him. I can't wait for it. It's going to be brilliant. We have to say a big shout out as well to our sponsors. Don't forget, guys, Kelly & Co. are offering you 10% off. All you got to do is go up to Kelly & Co., buy your furniture, buy your piece of carpet, anything at all. Head over to the cash out place and mention Cabin Fever and you get 10% off. And of course, we couldn't do the Maritime Hotel without doing Fionnbar as well. So the Maritime are offering you discounts on their meals from their bar menu. All you got to do is head up over to the bar restaurant, and mention Cabin Fever, and they'll tell you what type of specials they're doing as well for that. We also do a big shout out to Simply Suits, who are offering 10% off any sale over €100. So Simply Suits in Cork, they're on the Kinsale Road. Say hello to Andrew and all the boys up there. We must do a special shout out as well to the Brick Oven. They're open 5 days a week. They're closed. Must remember they're closed Tuesdays and Wednesdays, guys. And they'll offer you a free drink or a garlic bread for your takeaway. And all you got to do is say Cabin Fever. So, guys, I cannot give you more free stuff, even if I tried. We're doing the best we can with what we have, but we're going to get the podcast underway now, nice and sharpish. So, hopefully, if I press this button, we're going to be joined by the one and only Fionbar Walsh. Fionbar, how are you, sir?
How are you? How are you?
I'm
Very good,
very good.
thanks. I'm not
Hanging
sure
in
why
there.
I scared you.
I was only a young wee laddie when I went in. I left my gear there 1 or 2 days, and I got an angry message. This is Fionbar, the GM of the or the Maritime. Come collect your stuff. I was like, oh, fuck! I better pick up my stuff quickly. And then it was always depending on who the night manager was. I was like, is Fionbar on in the morning? No, I can't get my gear here for the night, and I'll collect it tomorrow. But how's things? How's COVID been treating you?
Very good. Well, lockdown was interesting. How I managed without divorce is beyond me. Um, being at home 7 days a week, this was a total shock to my wife. Uh, so I mean, sort of, I'd been away in Bantry 4 nights a week for nearly 10 years. So being home 7 nights a week, the boyfriends couldn't call around. Um, and then we've got the cabin fever of cooking. I had a challenge with the chefs in the group
Uh-huh.
before we went into lockdown. I was trying to get them to have zero food waste kitchens. And I thought during lockdown that sort of I'd start it on myself and see what we could do. And drove my wife bananas with regard to sort of making marmalades and jams and creating stuff and filling freezers and whatever. So, yeah, it's a bit sort of chaotic, but we're not back fully yet. And I kind of see my job as being not back for a while to come yet. But
The
I've
hotel industry
decided
is
to
probably on its knees.
go working with the Bon Secours Hospital now 3 days a week. So I mean, sort of at least the cabin fever is a little less.
So yeah, as most people have said, COVID-19 or the lockdown has been the biggest challenge to their marriage that they could ever
Yeah.
have. Really, people realize what living
and
together really means.
yeah, and I think I read one newspaper article, one of the Kerryman articles, and one of the guys was doing the diary, and he went to visit his grandfather at the beginning of it, and the grandfather was over 90 and had gone through what we classified as the emergency, or was the Second World War, and he just said to the grandfather, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" And he got a simple answer, "No."
Yeah, it's different.
Wow. Yeah.
It's different.
It's like, I mean, when you consider people have gone through the war, have gone through what the emergency was, whatever, and sort of, this was just such a lockdown worldwide. When you saw
Mm,
Times Square dead,
yeah,
Trafalgar Square dead,
Temple Bar dead.
Dublin City, Temple Bar dead,
Yeah, it's
and the towns every place, and yet then, sorry, we've a walkway beside the canal where we live here, and the world and his wife was walking the canal. So it's been good health-wise for an awful lot of people as well.
Yeah, it's been great, and as if you were able to get out, and luckily where we live now in Bantry, you know it well.
Yeah,
We had the rope walk, we had the Abbey walk. It's
yeah,
fantastic. It was just able to great just to get out. I would hate to have had to live in the cities where if you had like
yeah.
one park, you were just everybody was piling into that one park
Piling into
to
it. Yeah,
spend a
yeah,
small
yeah,
bit of time out in the open because like it was like Jesus, you couldn't get out. You know what I mean? Like you
yeah.
really couldn't get out in it, and everybody was going to start going a bit like literally cabin fever. That's why we call this podcast the Cabin Fever podcast because everybody needed something to do. You know, like
Yeah.
baking. That was we couldn't
I
buy
had, a- I had a
flour in
lap. I had a
restaurants.
lap that I used to. I had a lap that I used to do cycling when we were in the 2 kilometer zone, and my lap was 10 kilometers. So I did 5 laps, which was to get the 50 kilometers done. But it was the same route
Same route
because it
over
was
and over
within
again.
two. Yeah, I won't say whether I broke out or not, but let's just say I wasn't perfect.
Sure, Jesus. Yeah, I think from my house where I was living at the time, I used to walk from my house to the graveyard, and it was 2.1 kilometers.
Kilometers, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
so I
used to
used to
go
be
over
able to
to the
get there.
graveyard.
Yeah, yeah,
I used to go over to the graveyard once a week, and I'd light a candle for Donal, and that was my breakout. And I used
yeah.
to figure, well, I might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb, and I do a 40k cycle getting back.
You're in for it now, yeah.
uh,
Now we will touch on what is a fabulous story, your son's story, and Donald was an absolute gem to the country, I think, and it really is. And we'll get into that now in a little while, but we have to get into your job. And you were telling me a story about the light bulbs. This is an absolutely fantastic story about light bulbs.
when I first went to the Maritime, they had gold in green hospitality, but at the
What does that mean?
time that
It's just regular,
that
regular.
would mean, well, right, that green hospitality is a program that you run, that you get the green flag. It's like the green flags in schools and things like that, that you're doing energy control, management, recording, and reducing. You're doing food management, waste management, water management. Everything like is managed, and you're looking at it and trying to improve on how you can do it, on how your usage is.
Hmm.
So if you've gas or you've oil coming into the property, that you're reducing the use of that. That's sort of your carbon footprint as a business uh, on planet Earth is
Hmm.
being monitored, and then you're trying to reduce it. So I suppose the thing that you're talking about was when I first went to Bantry. I'd say, well, it's about 5 years into the program. The SEAI, or the what are the SEAI or something, their initial
It's close
is,
enough.
they came out with a grant that if you change the bulbs in the property to LEDs. Now LEDs are the most modern and the brightest, but the
Hmm.
least usage of power lights. If you change your lighting to LEDs, they would pay for the cost of the bulbs. Now,
Hmm.
you would pay for the fittings to put in the bulbs. So we decided we'd do the front of house in the Maritime and as a project the first year. And it cost about 16,000 altogether. That was about 8 for lights and 8 for labour, because we had to change some of the fittings to actually fit
Hmm.
the bulbs that we were putting in. But in the first year, we had a saving of 10,000. So in actual fact, the project cost us 6 grand in the first year. In the second year, if we put that 6 grand into the second year, we made a profit of 4 grand in the second year. And for the subsequent 7 years that I was down there, we were saving that 10 grand. That was
Every,
grand until we decided, I was able to show it to my financial controller. Look, we've saved the 10 grand by doing the front of house. We're doing an analysis on the back of house. I'm bringing it to you. Can I get the money to do the back of house? And the back of house, the projection was that we'd save about 15,000 in back of house. And one of the funny things was, uh, these are places you don't think about. And the car park is an underground car park. So we had 68 light fittings that actually ran 24/7 in the underground car park. It's a huge electricity bill.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
And you wouldn't think it just driving in there and driving out there, obviously. Like,
driving out, like, yeah. And,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
the other thing was that the fire escapes, they were on all the time as well, because they had to have lighting.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So, but we could have had movement sensor lighting. So we decided to go down the road of getting movement sensor lighting and changing the others to LEDs. Now, they were all CFLs. So, like, we were a green property anyway.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was green 10 years ago. That was the good quality of what was there 10 years ago. This is sort of 20 years later or 10 years later that we're going down the road of doing these. And we put in the background lighting and on the back of house, and the saving in the first year was 20,000. It did cost us 16,000, but the saving in the first year was about 20 grand. We
and
moved
that's
when
with
I
light
first
bulbs. Like
went down.
you'd never start with light bulbs. Do you know what I mean? Like
No,
as a beginner, you go, what's my biggest expense and how can I save? But like you
yeah,
wouldn't think of light bulbs. You know, you'd
yeah,
look at labor, you'd look at food, you'd look at probably maintenance and stuff like that, and you go, "Wow, I'm paying this." But light bulbs, like power,
yeah.
it's. Although you think of it, you wouldn't go down to the detail of actually changing the light bulbs.
Change the
But I
light
tell you
bulbs.
one thing: when
Well,
we get the pub
yeah.
back open again, I'll be changing all my light bulbs.
And it's an amazing thing. Like, I mean, sort of, yeah. And if there's a grant aid out there for you to do it, well, why not?
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah,
it's just it's sort of the fools are now. There are some slight disadvantages with it, which we'll say the LED is using such a low range of wattage
yeah.
that your dim area, it goes very, very quickly. So you
Yes,
could
yes,
be
yes.
very bright, very dark, very quickly.
Very quickly.
There
Yeah,
isn't the
there's a
same
big range.
range.
Yeah,
You need to get a better dim switch
yeah,
that
yeah,
has
yeah, yeah,
that can read a more sensitive range. We'll say,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's really the only thing
yeah.
that you have difficulties with. But other than that, I mean, purely like if you take it, the electricity bill when I first went down to the Maritime was about 120,000. It was at 92 when I left.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And we've got to talk about the tea towels. You told me this story while we were waiting in the queue for a removal one time. I think I had the restaurant at the time, and I was asking, I was going, Jesus, how can I save money? And you said,
yeah,
start with the small things. And of course, I was waiting in queue.
yeah.
I was going, small things. Like, what small things? And yet you have that story about the tea towels, which is a
I was doing an analysis of the laundry in the property because I wanted to put a laundry in to invest in a laundry. Now, at the time, I had done my figures and sums, but one of the things that jumped out at me with all the little figures was tea towels, and we were paying 27 pence per tea towel, and we were using about 100 tea towels a day, and it was costing me nearly 6, 7 grand a year just washing tea towels. And I thought, Jesus, I should easily be able to save money on this. And I went out and I bought a washing machine and a tumble dryer and 300 tea towels. And I got them to do them in house. And the first year possibly cost me maybe about 1,000 altogether. But I was saving 6,000 that year. And I was saving 7,000 for the following 5 years before I had to replace the washing machine again. So 35 grand in 5 years for tea towels, serious money. Like, it is sometimes the small things, but it was a forensic, like I was forensically going through the accounts of the laundry to see why we were spending, like at the time we were spending over 100,000 in laundry alone. So like, but there was nothing we could do with the sheets and the
yeah,
pillowcases and
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
that they
yeah.
were
The
just too
obvious stuff,
big of
like
bulk. But I mean, sort of, I'll be quite honest with you. Be Clean Laundry exists in Bantry now because of that research that I did.
yeah,
Because he came down to me and I gave him my research and reckoned that in 5 years I would have been able to pay it off. But he set up the laundry and he got me as a anchor tenant for
and that was all right
the
too,
first
wasn't it?
one, and that was basically brought 10 jobs into Bantry.
Yeah, like and like you said, it's the small things that
The
work.
small things that do it, yeah. And
It's,
like, think of the carbon footprint. We were having a lorry delivered to us 3 times a week, all the way down from Cork. Now
yeah,
it's locally, so
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
yeah.
delivery. You know,
Yeah, and he's a small van. He'd be whipping around the
a
place.
small van, he's whipping.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think he does
it's
that
not
as
one of
well.
these big lorries burning diesel all the way down to West Cork, like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a good little worker. A good little worker. He's
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
worker. That fella,
He's
like
a
in
good
fairness to him,
worker, big job.
he's
Yeah,
there night
yeah,
and day.
yeah,
Like Saturdays, Sundays, you see
yeah,
his
yeah,
pickup.
yeah, yeah.
Like I'd be picking up my gear on a Sunday morning, and he's in there sort of before me, loading with laundry and stuff
The
like that. You
laundry,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's a 7 day a week type cycle that he
Seven
does.
day
It's
week,
fantastic.
and there's 10. As far as I know, it's 10 people are employed in there at the high season.
Yeah.
7 days a week, like, I mean, sort of, that's not bad going.
No, not for tea towels.
You know, yeah. There's a few sheets and pillowcases and towels put in there as well now.
to be fair to him, no, it's a great operation. I've been out there a couple of
Yeah,
times, and
yeah,
it's an
yeah,
absolute fantastic operation he runs out there. So, and do you know what? I always appreciate the fella that sort of goes for it as well. So, a bit of a
yeah,
unique
yeah,
size
yeah.
business, and go for it. And do you know what? Best luck to him. He takes the risk, and it's worth every penny
He
to
was,
whatever he
he
makes.
was, yeah, and like I mean, he came in to me and he said, "Look, I'm thinking of setting up a laundrette." He owns the dry cleaning in
Mm,
the main street, so I'm sort of. And he came down to me and he said, "I'm thinking of going into the laundrette, but I need to know what the figures are." And
mm-hmm.
because I had done it
You
for
were able to.
myself to see whether we could do it in house, I had the figures. So I just handed him the figures and said, "Look, there, that's where you start with. Now, if you get another hotel the same size as me,
You can
suddenly
go.
you're on the pig's back. With you've two anchor tenants inside there that, if myself and the West Lodge are his main
Mate boys, yeah.
boys, I mean, sort of, we're keeping the laundry in our own area.
Hmm.
The work is kept in our own area.
Hmm.
I mean, sort of every, what is it they say? Rising tide floats all boats.
That it does. That it
You
does.
know,
You know, it's always good, especially the one thing I always like to keep it local as well. If something goes wrong, they're at an end of a phone, and they can get it. They can get a bollocking if needed.
you somebody that you can deal with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can
Do you
get
know?
things done. You can get
Yeah.
things done.
Yeah. Or you scare the shit out of them
Yeah,
the first
yeah.
time you meet them, and then
You don't.
seriously.
Stop holding me on that one, would you? Uh,
Ah, no, we
you should
won't.
meet my brother.
He is in the business. He knows all about it. He's an terrible
I've,
time.
I've, I've six of them.
Jesus. Six lads. You've always
Uh,
been, as you mentioned to me, you had a spell as a clerical error. You call that, or what was
that's
it?
right. Yeah,
A
yeah, yeah.
clerical error
Clerical
spell. I
error.
got
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Yeah, I
that
studied for
didn't
the I
work out.
studied for the priesthood for 5 years with
Just
the Augustinians. Just wasn't for me,
yeah, yeah.
and I mean, I gave it a go. It didn't happen, and I had started out as a chef in Rockwell College back in 19 blah blah blah. You weren't probably even a twinkle
I'd
in your
say not.
father's I'd say at that stage. It was the late 70s. And then I went, as I said, I went into the clerics for about 5.5 years. It didn't work out, and I suppose then I still have an altruistic sense throughout life, and we've done sort of assessments at work and things like that, and the altruism always still shines through. That sort of I would be very sensitive to employees or to
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
and charity work and the whole thing. So I think sort of it's there still. I'd have no problem. I mean, one of the things that was very funny here in Tralee at the beginning of the lockdown, the church we it was web church, shall we say, and we were getting an awful echo from the speakers in the church because they were
yeah,
using the speakers and they had a phone away from the speaker trying to pick it up and to broadcast it at the same time. And I said, to myself, I got to help them somehow. We've got to figure out how we're going to help the sound. So I rang my brother and I said, "How do I do this?" And he said, "You get hold of John Moriarty in Tralee and you go down to the church and you figure it out with him. He'll do it."
yeah. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I rang John Moriarty and I said, "John, I need to meet you in St. John's." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Look, go and watch their television broadcast." I said, "It's awful stuff." And you couldn't, like, we had a couple of guys, a couple of priests who are from Nigeria, and their pronunciation of Kerry names and Kerry place names wasn't particularly brilliant.
Yeah,
Or sorry, they're Kenyan priests. And like, I mean, I remember hearing at one stage that at the sort of the prayers where they do it for the dead, and they started listing off those who had died, and all I could get was Lyra Compon. And I knew the fella had died in Lyra Compon, but I didn't know who it was who had died.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I just said, we've got to help with the sound. One thing was the sound, the echo. If the accent, and if they couldn't pronounce the area, well, that's a different story altogether.
That was their problem, not
I mean,
yours.
that was their problem, not mine. Yeah, but we got the sound going, and I think it's been, I'm still a church goer.
Mhm.
I have a good, strong sense of faith, and
That's good.
I mean, sort of even if I do have rows with him, I'd still, be on the I prefer to believe that there
Be
is
on his
something in
side
the
than
afterlife.
be against his
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. Look, we
Yeah.
as I was raised Catholic, but I would be, as you describe, Irish Catholic. Only go
Yeah,
to church for funerals, or funerals, christenings, and communions,
yeah.
and weddings, really more than anything else. But and if whatever gets anybody through the day,
Oh
I
yeah,
just,
yeah.
you know what I
And
mean.
I
I find
think that
it
I
fascinating.
think it was very important for the older generation
Yes.
to have communication through church, through the stability of the institutions that were
Hmm.
there was very important for them. I mean, sort of lockdown was very cruel on some people.
Mm.
I had an uncle. I have an uncle who's 85 years of age, and he was living in Dublin, and he used to go every day swimming in the 40-foot in Sandy Cove.
Yeah.
Now he was in lockdown and cocooned, and his neighbour was doing his shopping for him. And he found it particularly hard because he couldn't even walk around the block. He was afraid to, because
Yeah.
if the neighbour saw him, would they give out to him for walking around the block?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he used to wait till the lights went out downstairs next door before he'd sneak out on a Saturday at about maybe 9 o'clock and do a walk around the block just to
Yeah.
get the
Yeah. It's
exercise.
simple things you just don't think of,
It's
like.
and my mother, she's 88, and
Yeah.
the idea that she couldn't see her grandchildren, or the grandchildren couldn't visit her, and it was to protect her. It wasn't anything else. That we were doing all this. Like, I mean, I did not go outside the county or the bounds majority of the time. I reserved. I mean, sort of, I didn't see I saw my mother 2 weeks before the lockdown, and I didn't
Yeah.
see her till after the lockdown lifted, till we were allowed to go 20 kilometers outside the county. Well,
It's the
I'm
small things
60
like that.
kilometers. I'm 60 kilometers outside the county, but I went up to visit my mother.
We've got a companion getting in on us. We've got Mr. Pat Gill coming into you as
Oh
well.
Jesus, he's still
Yeah, we're all
there.
meeting together now. It's the meeting of the minds here. The three
You
Stooges.
do realize that that the hotel experience in West Cork was run by outsiders for 10 years.
Kerry man.
Well, we both live in Kerry, but you see, I'm a Limerick man and he's a Dubliner. So
He's a Dublin
Jesus,
man, but you're still Kerry man. Kerry man to
we're
the people
still
around
correct.
here anyway. He says, "Good man, Fionnbar, former IHF former chairman, secretary of the Kerry branch. Pat Gill wishes you
Yes,
ran the show for years. Guess how we all ended in Bantry together." And Pat
that's right.
Gill was
So we had some stories.
oh Jesus! He's going to come on the show as well. We're going to talk to him about his hotel
Yeah,
life and stuff like that as
yeah,
well,
yeah,
because he's interesting stories along the way as well.
yes.
It's fascinating. Do you know what I mean? And like, even the reason this podcast sort of came about is to sort of like, for the small town, we've got some great stories.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
Bethany,
oh yeah,
like we've
yeah,
got some world champion record holders. We've got some world champion, like, do you know, we've got guys in concerts selling out places. Like, do you know what I mean?
yeah,
For a
yeah.
town that's maybe 3 or 4 thousand people, we've got some great stories here. And I look back,
But
which is really,
even West Cork, I would turn around and I'd say you've got great stories throughout West Cork. I mean,
yeah,
sort of. I was out cycling one day, going towards Castletown Bear, and I use this with Fáilte Ireland, because there's a sign on the way out near Ahli's, which is to the O'Sullivan Memorial.
yeah,
So I was out there, finger sign, thinking O'Sullivan Bear. This is Castletown Bear area. I presume it is an O'Sullivan Bear Memorial or something.
yeah,
I go down this little lane and there's a cottage there. And this is the cottage where the O'Sullivans were born.
hmm,
And the father of the O'Sullivan brothers were born. And I go a little bit further on, and there's an anchor on the beach, and there's a storyboard about the five Sullivan brothers, who were the first five guys who were torpedoed in the First World War in the first sinking of an American ship. And it
jeez,
was the reason for the rule of Saving Private Ryan. No five brothers could serve in the same regiment ever again. They had to be in different branches of the armed services. So
and
no
that,
president would ever send that letter to a family again that their five
family
children
was
were
wiped
wiped
out.
out in one occasion. And that was the whole story behind Saving Private Ryan, because his four brothers were killed in different things across the world, but the
Yeah, yeah,
president said, "We'll get this one home." But I always think about, if that was in Kerry, that cottage would not be a cottage.
no,
It
be
would be a tea
multi-story
room with a
hotel.
museum.
Yeah, and that's the
You
one thing
know,
I will say about the Kerry Tourism Board. There's that meandering pier, you know, that
Oh
fucking
yeah. Donal Quinn.
yeah. It is like like there's pictures all
Yeah,
over the world for
the
it.
world, yeah.
It's less
Or
than
if you
50.
take Dan Foley's bar in Annascaul, it went on
Yeah,
the front page of the National Geographic. It's the one with the Caller Cozen. It's the pink one with the Caller Cozen gas
yeah,
picture painted on the wall, and that went on the front page of National Geographic. Yeah, Kerry can do it, you know.
Kerry can do it. Like this pier is 50
That's
feet
right,
long,
iconic. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
iconic. And I'm
yeah,
going
yeah,
like
yeah. And the
only
sheep are on it,
Kerry.
and the
The
sheep
sheep
are
are on
going
it. Yeah,
down it.
yeah. You can't even walk two people side by side
traffic,
going down
traffic
it.
jam.
And it's great. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
must say, herself dragged me out of bed to get there one time to go down and see it, and I was like, "Is this it?" As is, honestly,
yeah,
this can't be the spot. Like maybe it's a smaller replica of what it is. Nope,
yeah.
this is it, Terence.
No,
This
is it?
is it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's like the pier
There's
in the
actually four
Olympic.
piers. There's four piers along there that are pretty much the same.
Yeah,
But the one you're talking about is the Dún Quinn one.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah,
But it
yeah, yeah.
works. You know what I mean? And
Oh
for a
yeah,
time,
yeah, yeah,
for a time
yeah.
to get up cattle, it was the only way. You couldn't get cattle up a straight
That's
hill,
it.
and
Yeah.
it was the only way. Like engineering wise, it works fantastic. But as a story, Kerry can sell anything like a fair. You know, I remember one time.
Yeah.
I remember one time we had a couple of Americans in the bar, and they asked me, "Oh, Jim, have you ever been to America?" And I says, "Yeah, I've been a couple of times." They said, "I've been to Vegas, and I love Vegas. It's fantastic." Oh yeah, but have you ever been to the real America? And I was like, "Well, I was in New York as well." They said, "Have you ever been to the real America?" And I was like, "No, I said they're the only two places in America I've been." And I was just saying, "Oh, well, where have you been in Ireland?" Like, "Oh, we were in Dublin, and then we went to Killarney." And I was like, "You haven't been to
Yeah.
the real Ireland yet, soda." I said, "I said Vegas is like Killarney is to Ireland, like, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
Dublin
yeah,
this is
yeah,
like
yeah,
New York."
yeah,
And he started laughing. He says, "Yeah, I suppose you're right." That was it.
yeah.
But Kerry, whoever invented Kerry tourism aboard, I tell you, they deserve a Nobel Prize because
But,
you boys definitely know
they're
how
good
to.
at it, but they work together. They work together, and
Well,
that's one
that
of the
is a big
things they do
plus.
well. You know.
That really is a big plus there. And about the cycling, I've been following you on Facebook, and you do some miles on that bike. I could never take up cycling. I can run, but I can never take up cycling. It just, I don't know. I'd end up getting myself lost. Like,
Right. The cycling started when Donal was dying. Donal did cycling for the last couple of months of his life. He took a bike after he got his lung operation. He took to the bike to build up his aerodynamics, and
yeah,
he had lost half
his
his lung,
cardio
so he
stuff. Yeah,
needed the cardio, vascular cardio. Yeah, was what it was for. And he did a cycle in September from well, it was from Mal's Gap into Tralee with the Cross Rugby Legends. They were staying in Bantry and they were doing the Malin to Missa.
yeah. Hmm.
So he went with them in the car, the lead car, up until they got to Mal's Gap, and then he took his bike out and he cycled down and led them into Tralee, which was a 65-kilometre ride for a young fella. Now I found out afterwards that I know he crashed 3 times going down Mal's Gap, and that's only because your man saw the 3 crashes in the rear view mirror of the car. I know why he crashed because I took his bike out about 3 months after he died, and I went out what you call it hill out of Bantry. Like Bantry's sea level, you know that.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
only
yeah,
way out of Bantry is uphill.
yeah.
I went out Hurley's Hill,
Oh yeah,
right,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and 5 kilometers out there, and I thought I died. Now you're talking to a fella who was 25 cigarettes a day, taken up the bike for the first time in 30 odd years, and got out up to the top of the hill, nearly died, thought I was dead. James Cleary was with me. He was the leisure
Seeing
centre
the bright
manager.
light and all that.
And we turned around and we said, come on, we'll go back. So we turned around and headed back. And that's when I found out that my son had switched the brakes off in the bike. And the reason he'd switched the brakes off in the bike was he'd gone through cancer 3 times. And cancer hadn't killed him. It sure as hell wasn't going to be a fucking bicycle that'd do it. So he decided to cycle without brakes.
Oh my
He was
god.
hitting 35 and 40 as an average, 35, 40 kilometers an hour as an average on the bike. He was getting up to 70 kilometers, things like that. Risky stuff, like there was Tour de France type stuff that he was
Jesus.
doing. But it was a case of he hadn't been killed by cancer 3 times. Well, it wasn't going to be the bike that would do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I made a commitment to him that I would do the cycle he did with the Legends. We'd do it from that year. It was going from Tralee up to Mal's Gap because they were coming down from Malin to Mizzen.
Mhm.
So I got the uphill, he got the downhill, little fecker. So that's where it all started. And I started with James doing, getting longer and longer at it. And I suppose before they came down that year, I wanted to check whether I could do 100k or not, because there's 100k to go from Tralee to Bantry.
Yeah.
So I did the Sean Kelly Dungarvan 100k that year, and then I did the Legends 110k. I think it was from Bantry, or from Tralee to Bantry. And that was grand, and just kept at it. I mean, I've done the Mizzen to Malin with them. I've done the Atlantic 1000. I've done various different ones. I mean, but the social side of the cycling, when you're doing a group cycling like that with the cross guys, it's all done for cancer research. The Rugby Legends one, and it's raised. I think it's at this stage raised about about a million or something like that
Wow.
for cancer research, and it's great fun. But like, I mean, the nights are dangerous, and you're sort of glad to get up in the morning and get on a bicycle, because you know that you won't see a pint for at least 8 hours, because you've another 100 kilometers to cycle.
Yeah, yeah. I've been by my father and my grandfather do the vintage rallies on the motorcycles, like, and
Right,
they say, like,
right,
oh,
right,
Jesus,
yeah,
if anybody was to stop them or anything like that, none of
yeah,
them, literally, they go so
yeah,
slow
yeah,
that they're just prodding along, like the
yeah.
social aspect of it just takes over the whole lot of it, like,
It's
you know what I mean?
total, yeah, yeah. Well, like, no, these guys are challenging, because they're all fairly. They would have been fit. They mightn't be fit as they were, but they're definitely, the Wallace brothers are very challenging on each other, let
Yeah,
alone anybody else beating them. And I remember the first time going up to Malin. It was a year after Donal. No, it was 2 years after Donal died, and I had been warned they'll dash
they'll
for,
go for it.
once they see Malin, there's a race for Malin. Don't get involved. And there was a friend of mine, Ted Fitzgerald, and Ted was he was a pensioner farmer from County Meath. And Teddy, I pulled up beside him. I said, Teddy, we'll hold back here. He says, what do you mean? There's a dash going to happen very shortly, and we don't want to be part of it. And when you get up to Malin, the road actually narrows
Hmm.
very, and it turns very steeply.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And as they're going in, there's 100 guys, and it's getting crushed, and and suddenly the whole thing goes crash down on its side. I mean, you can see it, and the old fellows are sitting at the back looking at this thing as it collapses.
Yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, it's on a hill. It's a steep enough hill. It's not. It's too steep to get on the bike and start cycling again. So they have to walk the last 100 yards up to Malin.
yeah,
And of
yeah.
course, the old fellas come along, sauntering in nice and slowly. How are you, lads? We'll cycle it. We'll finish it for you.
We'll
So it's a
keep it
great
going.
story of the hare and the tortoise, if you remember
Yeah,
it.
I do. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's brilliant. That's absolutely. And
Yeah.
they just after they still have all that energy just to go for it up to
They
Malin.
just go for it, and like, the road is just too narrow to handle the number of cyclists that are trying to get there, and there's just no way. Like, the first 10 might get through, but after that you just have a mayhem crash
And it's
of
every year,
about 100 of them
every year.
every year that it happens. And it's just, they see it. And I was warned, like, I think I was warned from the first year that they did it, that sort of this happened. So I was told, stay back.
Stay
Don't get
back.
involved in it. You're too old. You don't need the crash.
There's a lot to be said not to be the first soldier over the line.
Yes.
Like you keep your legs and shins and knees all intact after
That's
that.
it.
Like
Yeah, 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 yeah,
we
yeah.
we
But
touched on
yeah,
Donal, and do you mind, like, for what I'm gonna
he's
say?
looking over my shoulder. If you can't see him, there's a picture of
I
him
can see him
behind me.
just in the top corner there. I can see him there. He's taking part. I'm sure he's laughing and joking at
Uh,
us. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen on TV. I genuinely think it has to be one of the top 10 moments on Irish TV. His interview on the Late Late Show. It
yeah.
was it was breathtaking. It really was. Even to this day, I still watch it sometimes, and it still puts the hairs on the back of my neck. He was, like, excuse the pun, he had balls, man. He was
Yeah.
brave. He was a
He
brave.
wrote a couple of articles, and it was picked up on by the local media. Well,
Yeah.
what actually happened was he was given an award by the Radio Kerry and Kerry's Eye for um, what he had done in fundraising over the years.
Mhm.
He raised about 50,000, 60,000 for Crumlin while he was going through cancer treatment there. So they were giving him an award. They came down. They asked him, and he had a piece written about his journey through. Uh, he had no, it was an essay that he had done in school, and the school published it in the school magazine. And the Kerry's I said, "Have you any? We want to publish this. Have you any other pieces? Because we'd like to look at them." And Donal had a letter written about to his friends. It was meant for the school after he had died, and it was asking them to value the one gift that they had that he didn't have, and that was the gift of life, and not to consider suicide as an option. Because he'd
Yeah.
seen 2 suicides in school,
Mm.
and he just wanted to give them the encouragement to go forward with it. And of course, I could like his mother. He didn't want this published, and his
Yeah.
mother said, "Well, you have the letter, don't you?" And he said, "Yeah, but I don't like if looks could kill you," because his mother in half that time. But he still went up and got the letter and brought it down. And I could see your man's the newspaper guy's eyes just lit up when he read this, and I
It's
knew we were in trouble. We were in trouble because this was going to go all over the place, and it did.
yeah.
Like I mean, sort of, it
Yeah.
started with the Kerry's Eye, and then it went on to the Independent, and then it went on to Brendan O'Connor with the Saturday Night Live show, and everybody wanted Donald's interview,
Yeah.
but we know he was only going to be able to do one more interview, probably,
Hmm.
certainly one that was going to be on television, and it was going to be the only one. Like
Hmm.
even on the night, Brendan didn't realise that Donald had just moved into the wheelchair, and I wanted Donald to be brought out second
Yeah.
because we could wheel him out at the interval
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
put him
Yeah.
into
Absolutely.
place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Brendan said to us, "Well, if he could walk the couple of steps, it would be better. He can take he's going to get his hour of glory. Let him take his hour of glory. This will
Yeah.
be his last chance." And I didn't realize of what it was happening because we got to the studio and we met. We said we'd go out a bit early and we'd do a couple of trial runs at it. And Brendan was like a cat in a hot tin roof when we got there. And it wasn't the case of that Donal would go down the steps. Brendan was just too nervous to be interviewing anybody before Donal, that he wouldn't do them justice. If
Justice.
he
Yeah.
knew that Donal was coming afterwards, he'd be
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about
He was
Donal,
concentrating
that he
so
wanted to
much.
get Donal out of the way. And like there's supposed to be 10 minutes. It was 20 minutes, and 20 minutes on television is an awful long time, you
Yeah.
know. And you know, when
Yeah.
and in the middle of it, the floor manager was there, wrap it up, and Brendan said, "No, no, no. There's more out of this, and I want to get. He's only going to get one chance at this, and I'm going to give it to him." And told him
Yeah.
to go
Fair
away, and
play.
he just kept on through like I've been certain. It was incredible to watch it from a technical point of
Yeah.
view in the audience watching it, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
even in the room, we knew it was special because there was absolute silence, and
Everybody was cued in.
social media died for half an hour while Dawn was being interviewed. And as soon as he finished, it went absolutely ape with
Mhm.
Donal. So much that Donal was trending within
Yeah.
an hour on Twitter. Now, I didn't know what trending meant. I know now what
Trendy didn't
trending
give you any
means.
ideas on you.
uh, he was on Facebook, he was on Twitter, he was on everything. It was going ballistic on what you call it. And, his pals were ringing up and or texting him and saying, "Have you seen this?" And, and it was just so funny to watch. And I heard one person talk about a pub in North Kerry where there was a fairly tough lady was behind the bar counter, and Donald's interview was going on, and he was about halfway through it, and she said, "Lads, I need to go in the back a minute." And there were four fellas at the bar counter, and he said, "Mary, you can bring one out for each of us as well.
Yeah.
We're all in tears here."
Fuck, man, it was breathtaking. Like it really
It
was.
was,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, man. Yeah, I've no words. Like, and I said that to you before. I've said it like
Yeah,
in passing a couple of times. Like, still, it was
yeah.
just so power. It was so raw. It was so powerful. It was so pure.
He was
It,
just in a particular position to be able to say it because he had a life sentence that he was going to die within a couple of weeks. And he just didn't like the idea of people taking their lives when here he was fighting for his life for the third time.
And
and
just for the
that
people that
made him
don't know
angry.
this story and the listeners,
Yeah.
he battled it. Was it 4 times he
Four
battled it?
years, four,
4 years he
three
battled
times, 4 years he battled us. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He got it when
and
he was 12 first. He had his knee amputated, not knee amputated, but a prosthetic put into his knee. The second time he got it in his lung, and then the third time was the terminal diagnosis that he had got it. And it's funny, he actually got knocked off a bike in September, dislocated both his shoulders, and it was that one of the shoulders wasn't going back properly by October that we mentioned it up in Crumlin, and he was sent down for a scan. And well, he was sent for an X-ray first, and the X-ray led us to a scan, and scans weren't good places for us. So when an hour later, we found out that he had it back in the shoulder, and then about within a week we had a complete body scan done, CAT scan, and we found out that he had 7 tumors and 2 lesions. So our number was up at that stage. Now, mind you, they said to him that have an early. He said, "How long do I have?" And his doctor told him to have an early Christmas. He was still around in May the following year. It was the 12th of May that he died, and I'll never forget. On the 1st of May, he tweeted, they said have an early Christmas. It's the first day of summer, the first day of May. Up yours, cancer. Up yours, doctors. And it wasn't up yours he used either.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh fuck, why not? Yeah. Fucking hell. Wow.
I mean, sort of, it was, yeah, like he had outstayed like anything they had thought that he was going to be around. Like, and even, for the TV interview, they had two ambulances and an air ambulance in place. They had an ambulance in Crumlin on standby and an ambulance in Tralee on standby, so that his one thing was he was going home to die. He wasn't going to die anyplace else but Tralee. And they had an ambulance in place to pick him up from RTE if necessary, bring him out to the airport, air ambulance him to Tralee, and get him from Tralee
Get him
Airport
home.
to his home. If
And he
if
said,
things turned wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Now we didn't find that out until afterwards, but all
Fuck.
the plans had to be put in place to be ready for
Wow. Um, there's not too many times that people can shut me up, like, but this is
it.
this is definitely one of them times where
His family was like, I mean, sort of the funeral was very funny. I mean, if you ever get a chance to look back at the Haka and the funeral,
yeah,
it was hilarious because he had a couple of friends in school. He used to train the Tralee Rugby Club under, I think it was 13s and 15s at the time, and one of his lads was a Maori, half Maori, so he used to do the Haka before he used to go out and play every match. And he was one of the special guys from the school. I was asked to go down to the school by one of the teachers. There were four fellows who wanted to see me, and they wanted to get the story that he'd died peacefully. So I went down the day after he died and into the school, and met the four, and I said to them, come up and visit the house. I know it's private. It's supposed to be private today, but you four are welcome. Bring your families with you.
yeah,
You can come up and see how he is and
yeah,
that he's
yeah.
at peace now. So anyway, your man was was standing by the coffin, and all I thought was Jesus. But I'd scare the rest of the house. I'd ask you to do the Haka here, and people wouldn't know what's going on. And I walked out the door anyway, and I introduced the lad to Elma, and I said who he was, and I said, it'd be great to get us into the ceremony someplace. Sort it out, she said. That's your job now. And Danny went away home, and he knew he was going to have to do. So I got on to Jay, one of the funeral organisers that I had. He's a friend of mine from the rugby club, and I said, Jay, Danny's going to do the Haka, but we don't know where. Sort out where it's to happen. So of course Jay sorted it out. But if you look at the Undertaker after Danny comes up and he presents Elma with a jersey which is signed by all the team.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the tradition of the Haka is that the guy who's going to do it sits with the dead person for the 24 hours before the burial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we couldn't ask a 13-year-old to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
the other side was they give a gift that is shared amongst the mourners, normally a gift of food.
Mm-hmm.
So what he did was he got his team to sign his jersey, and he gave the jersey to mum. And then he came over to me and he took his Munster medal from the league off his chest and he said, "But for your son, I wouldn't have had this medal. I'm gifting this to you as his father. Thank you for your son." That nearly got me to tears. No, we didn't want any crying. We didn't want any more
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
mourning with this, and it really was very hard to hold back
yeah.
there. But anyway, he turned around and went around to the front of the hearse, and the undertaker looked to me and he nodded, and sort of I nodded to him, and so he started to close the hearse. And Graham is the undertaker, and he knows nothing about anything sporting. Show him the engine of a car, he'll tell you what vehicle it was, what year it was, what make it was. But to show him a rugby ball, a football, a tennis ball, he doesn't know the shape he doesn't know the difference between them. So anyway, the next thing is this. The haka starts at the front of the hearse, and you can see Graham. Graham doesn't lose composure, but he suddenly goes to the side of the hearse and looks out, and his jaw drops. He doesn't know what's going on at the front.
The small fella in the front
And
just going,
there's a guard sergeant on the street, and he's about to come over to grab Danny because he thinks he's having a fit or something. And luckily, there was another guard there who was a rugby guy who grabbed hold of him and said, "No, stand back there." Graham gets into the hearse and he says, "What's going on here?" And your man who's driving the hearse says, "I don't know either, but whatever it is, we run with it."
go with it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Wow. Like I did, yeah,
But yeah,
Jesus.
we
Um,
forgot to tell him.
holy shit.
uh,
But yeah, do you know, and yeah, I honestly when his story just I don't know. I'd look like I
yeah.
said every time he's just it's so powerful, man. It's
Well,
yeah, and you
the
think
funny part is he's now on the leave. He's on the sixth class confirmation uh, curriculum in primary school. He's on transition year in the CPSE program and in religion as a person of faith and a person of influence. A young person of faith and a young person of influence. So we're traveling up and down the country visiting. Like he
I
was
was gonna ask you about this
Don't
next.
last his don't last his mother in November. Will people remember me, Mammy? Sometimes now we look up and we say, "Oh, we wish they'd forget." But he
They
was a
don't
great
expect Dave Brown.
educator. He was a great educator, but to us, he's been a great geography teacher because there are parts of Ireland we've been to that we no idea ever existed, where there's schools that we've ended up visiting and then parishes we've ended up going to and things like that. But yeah, he's still remembered, and I
And
mean,
what
lockdown.
what comes with that though? What like is he just a lesson, or is it a more religious base, or is it a more of a social thing, or
A young person of influence and who had influence, I think, is it's they're looking for, mostly that are looking for leadership. They're looking for people of guidance, people of influence, people. Could I stand up and be counted as a young person? Can I do something? And it's that's really one of the angles. And yes, his faith is one of the things that was there throughout the whole thing. Donal had a very strong faith. Now, it was simple to start with,
yeah,
but it was very strong and very there at the end. Like, I mean, he received communion every day from when he was terminally diagnosed to the day he died. And even on the day he died, his mother had it for him, um, in his name. And I mean, sort of, it was something he wanted to do as well. It wasn't something we forced on him or anything like that. He just had felt that God had him, and he spoke to his friends about it. Like that, he said that God has me in the palm of His hand, and I'm walking with Him on this journey. And I mean, I know James had, wouldn't go on away trips without his rosary beads.
yeah.
With him after Donal died, he said, "I say my decade of the rosary to Donal every night," and that was one of his friends. And I mean, it's just amazing what you know where he's at, and or
And
where he's
he will live
how he's
forever and all
influencing
that of it.
people. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like the fact, I suppose one of the great things is he was interviewed, and the interview was captured, and it was put up on the internet.
Yeah,
Even though the rights to it were being purchased, the night that the rights were being purchased, Brenda made sure that it went on YouTube, so it's up there all 19 minutes. He said this should not be owned by any one person,
Anybody.
and
Yeah.
this is too big for everybody. And I'll never forget the Christmas that year. Google were being interviewed in on Pat Kenny, and the three biggest influences in Ireland Google that year were Pope Francis was elected, Nelson Mandela died, and Donal Walsh. Now there's three names
Yeah,
to be put
that's
up,
rubbing a shoulder
and
to
now
them.
here's the order it was in: Pope Francis, Donal Walsh, and Nelson Mandela.
Wow, that's some
That was the
like
order that they came in as being the highest searches on Google that year,
yeah,
which
it's
is incredible, you know.
yeah, it's an incredible story, man. It's and this is why I said I had to get you
Yeah,
on this.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is a
yeah,
fantastic story, and I think it's such a like it's so pure, you know.
yeah,
Like and even like I listened to the interview today, and I was gonna like I didn't bring stuff and up about it, but like you could see it in him, like you know, it was just like
yeah.
it was one of them moments where you kind of knew exactly where you can remember where you were at that
Where
time.
you were, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
I
I know,
always, do you know what I compare it to with a lot of people, because people said I never watched Brendan O'Connor, but for some reason that night I was watching
yeah,
Brendan O'Connor,
I was the same.
and and the other was, do you remember where you were when Princess Diana died? I
I
do.
remember
Or
that.
do you remember when the Twin Towers went down?
Yeah,
I
I do.
remember that. This is
Yeah,
a do. Do you remember where you were when Donal Walsh was interviewed?
yeah, and it
And
is.
that's it. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of
It's
them
one of
things.
those things. Yeah, yeah,
I still
yeah,
remember
yeah,
it very vaguely or very vividly.
yeah,
It's like I know exactly where I was when I know Michael Jackson died. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
one of
yeah,
them.
yeah.
I don't know.
Moments of
Yeah,
why do I remember this? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can't
And
remember
it's
what I did
because
for yesterday.
he captured everybody, like, I mean, sort of,
He
and
did.
you know, I mean, even the conversation, I remember hearing people in the conversation the day after, and you know, they were saying that sort of people who didn't see the interview, they had to go back and look at it
Yeah,
because everybody was talking about it in the shop,
yeah,
and I missed it.
yeah. Oh, what was this thing on last night? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
who's this
yeah,
fella?
yeah. Yeah, who's that young fella? Yeah, I remember it now. Yeah, yeah. It's
Uh,
yeah, man.
and
It
it's
was
just funny, like, I mean, sort of, he only did his 20 minutes on TV. He had tens of thousands of correspondence afterwards. He wrote his 2 pages for the Independent, and then he died about 2 weeks after the publication of the 2 pages of the Independent. And he had 6 months went by that there wasn't a week that he had at least a half a page in a national newspaper.
that's
Or
some
there was a documentary, or there was something on about him. And then after Christmas, they did the Donal Walsh My Story, which was Brendan
yeah.
brought out the documentary that he did on it.
Mhm.
And then the following year, we had the launch of the book Donal's Mountain,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
which I wrote. And like, I mean, it just went on and on and on, and then the schools started picking up on it. With regard to having us and doing things and people doing things. And, like, you know, there's over 500,000 has been raised in his name since he died. And we've used it for youth mental health and youth positive mental health with young people. We've invested it in every theatre house in the country and internationally has got a Donal Walsh room, which is a themed youth room to go in, and actually young people can go in and relax and chill out in it and do their interviews or whatever, or talk about what they want to in there. We've worked with the a couple of other. We've worked with Crumlin. We've
Mhm.
worked with Tralee General with their children's ward. We've worked with a number of other different projects on youth mental health with the sporting organisations as well, providing positive mental health for sporting organisations, GAA mainly, up and down the country. But it's been an adventure. We got landed in it. You know, I mean, Uh, Don- Donald did his talk. He did 20 minutes, but here we are, 10
You
or
pick it up
what,
the
8 years
slack.
later. We're still fucking doing the work. Thanks, Donald. Why did you keep your mouth shut? It was over to you, Dad. Over to you,
Yeah,
Mom. Good luck.
look, thanks, lads. You take it from here.
I've
uh,
done my bit.
it's
But it's been, yeah, it's been an adventure. It's been, I'll tell you, it's the greatest honor is the respect he is still shown.
yeah,
And even, and every time you talk about him, even in the school, you can still hear a pin drop. They won't. There's no, like, they still have a great respect for him.
mm,
And this is 7 years later. Now, this year is the first year I think that would be with Tralee uh, College, the school that he went to, CBS the Green, that the leaving certs will not have been in the school when Donal was there. Donal was dead before these guys started.
yes, okay, yeah,
This
yeah,
is their
yeah.
first year
This is their
of
first
a
year.
clean through
Yeah,
all the way to
you don't
leaving
ever
cert.
think that though, do you? Like you don't
Yeah,
like
there are steps you don't like. You
yeah,
have to think that come about that sort of, and you don't realize it until, oh geez, yeah, these guys wouldn't have. These guys were in sixth class when he spoke out.
when he spoke out, and they
Yeah,
yeah,
now they're doing they're getting their graduation.
yeah, and it's such a great thing that it's such a well, I again still lost for words. I
Yeah,
there's not too many times I do get it, and I'm definitely lost for words after this one. But it was such a powerful message, and it was a message
yeah,
that everybody needs to listen to. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not just
yeah.
it's not just 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. It's
No,
everybody,
no, yeah, yeah.
and like
Terence, Terence, the South Kerry coroner. I can't remember what his surname is again, but he came on about 6 months afterwards, and he said, "We've had an absolute stoppage of youth suicides in Kerry in the last 6 months." And he says, "I can only attribute it to one person, and that's Donal Walsh. He was the catalyst," he said, "that stopped suicide in its tracks for a period because he actually spoke out." And I'll never forget, there was a death of a young girl in Limerick, and the parish priest and the parents got together to come out and speak. And the language, that the girl had lost her life through suicide,
mhm,
and the parents got together to speak to the priest, and they came out and said, "This is a tragic family incident. Please don't popularize it on social media." And I thought, wow. And I could hear Donal resonating through what they
yeah,
said, that this was, you know, he had seen two suicides in his own school. And part of the thing was they were being glorified on social media.
mm,
And, it was something he didn't like. And, you know, if the copycat happens, then does the person realize, yes, you'll get your 3 days of glory, but you
that's it.
won't see it.
Mm,
And by the way, there is no coming back.
yeah,
It was one of the things I specifically wanted that I knew we were going to have a huge crowd at the graveside. And I buried my son. I literally, myself, I have
mm,
5 brothers. I have 5 brothers-in-law, and Donal had 5 buddies. I had 6 shovels, and I asked the undertaker to have the shovels there ready. We were going to bury my son there and then in front of everybody. And I remember saying looking at Graham, and I said, "Where's the shovels?" And he says, "You want them now?" And I said, "Yes, while everybody's here, I want to make a statement. Donal isn't coming back." There were about 3,000 young people in the graveyard. I wanted them to understand he's dead. He's not coming back.
this is it. Yeah, this is what set
You
in
know,
stone
it's,
really
it's
means.
yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be like yeah, it's going to be one of them things, and I don't know how we're going to try and like. I saw a very good post the other day. It was we're a very sad or we're a very sad world with happy pictures. You
yeah,
know, like
yeah.
we don't know how to deal. And like I've had people on the podcast talk about how social media is affecting the young people and how we were comparing on our lives and like, but it's like the social media aspect of it and anything like that. But mental health is probably going to be the biggest killer in this country for for a little.
Sorry, disturbance behind me.
You're all right.
Right.
Do you want a cup of tea? That's what
Yeah,
you got.
social media is no. It was I'm making jam at the moment.
This is where the zero waste comes back
Apple
in.
jelly.
It's burning.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but social media is feeding into this catalyst of like you think you're so perfect, and like the thing about it is all these kids are showing their perfect life, and they're not
yeah.
getting so
But
many
it's
likes,
not. Yeah,
and
yeah,
then they're going, well, if people don't accept me for being perfect, how can they accept me
yeah,
when I'm not perfect? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I'm
yeah,
showing
yeah.
a whole apple here, but there's actually a bite taken out of the other side of it.
On the other side of
I
it.
mean,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
trying to show the whole apple here, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Um, it's going to be scary. Like I've got
yeah.
three little girls coming up, and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, and like I mean, and the only thing is, they're growing up with it.
Well, that's it.
We
That, yeah,
our mistake was we didn't learn it fast enough to
yeah,
control it.
yeah.
But they're growing up with it,
Hmm.
and even Donald's generation are growing up with it. But I think that sort of we didn't put the rules in when
Quick
it
enough.
happened, when it
Yeah,
started,
yeah, yeah,
and now it's too late.
yeah.
Now, having said that, social media, it can be used for the most positive ways.
It can be. Yeah,
I mean, and it is being used very positively. You take, I mean, even Donald's story is social media driven.
yeah.
Um, but uh, but when it's used badly or used wrongly, it can be very hurtful.
Mm,
You
yeah,
know, and
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's the danger. I mean, sort of, it's a very serious.
It's
I
the
look at the
line.
positivity of it, but it's also like, I mean, just the fake news.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's
mean,
everywhere. It's over everything. Like,
it's scary. I mean,
yeah,
you've a U.S. president who turns around and says, drink disinfectant. Huh?
yeah, yeah.
Sorry?
Drink bleach.
Yeah.
Inject yourself with Tylenol. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and pretends to play it off the following day that he didn't mean it like, but, I mean, these things are, you don't say that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Somebody's stupid enough to try it.
As Mike Tyson says, people have gotten too used to writing things and not getting a slap in the face for it afterwards.
Yeah,
Not in them
yeah,
exact language, but Mike Tyson, he says,
yeah,
yeah, we're
yeah,
gotten too
yeah, yeah,
comfortable
yeah.
about slagging someone off without getting a punch in the face.
The face. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's what it's become because everybody, like even doing this, I've had people come up and say, "Oh, you're a langer. Who do you think you are?" and all this. I
yeah.
personally am strong enough not to listen to it. I think whether it was the boxing years ago or the DJing, where I was listening to loads of drunken people come up and say, "Play something that we all want to dance to." Your shit,
That's it,
like you kind of build up
yeah.
it, like you know what I mean. Yeah,
I never said that to you. I never said that to you.
no, no, you didn't. But I tell you one thing: when you didn't ring, I always came. I was like, "Fuck, I better go down." Um, what's wrong? Fucking hell. Even the other day when you rang me, I was like, I had a wedding, but it was been cancelled, and I was like, oh, fuck, we didn't get in contact with him to make sure they rang me if I was there or not. And then I was thinking it was about 12:15 when you rang me, and I was like, I thought of it after. I said everyone should have been closed at 11:30 anyway. I don't know why I was still panicking. I said he doesn't even work in the maritime anymore, but I was still
Was
panicking. Then I should have been down in the maritime at the time. But yeah, that's that God
it?
complex you have. Like, you know what I mean? You always have the God complex there. Like, have the fear of
Oh,
God.
that's good. Trying to tell my wife that. Yeah,
I might block
and your
you after this.
permission to say it.
I might block you to say after this now. That's the only problem. But yeah, no, look, we're gonna wrap it up there because it's been an absolute pleasure. Fionnbar, thank you so much for doing this. But we have got the most important part of it. We have our 30 seconds rapid fire quiz, which we get all our guests to ask about. Um, so you all set? This is the most important part now. This will be the most challenging questionnaire you've
Go
ever
on.
had in your career, right? So
Right.
you've got to answer these very very fastly. Yeah, right. So here we go. Hold on. We had a clock, but I broke the clock after I making it, and then it broke. So we got to just give us a couple of seconds. Right, 3, 2, 1. Phone call or text message?
Phone call.
Oh, can you hear? Phone call. What's your favorite movie?
Phone call. The wild geese. The wild
McDonald's or Burger
geese.
King? McDonald's or Burger King? We're after
McDonald's.
getting a delay now. Hang on a
I don't know what's going on here.
We'll have to get.
You started 30 seconds and I'm
Most
about
important
3
part.
minutes into it.
Right, hang on a second now. Right, you can hear me, I can hear you. Yes.
Just about.
See, we've got a delay. Just about. Okay, right. We're
Yeah.
gonna try. I'd say herself is probably using the Netflix upstairs, and it's interfering. So right, tell everyone to get off the 30 seconds, and we go. Right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Phone call or text message.
Phone call. Phone
What's
call.
your favorite movie?
The Wild Geese.
McDonald's or Burger King?
McDonald's.
A scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
Oh, which is good? 1 or 10?
10 is good, 1 is bad.
10.
The strangest place you've made a phone call?
Probably in a train.
In a train. A person you'd like to have dinner with, dead or alive?
Oh, don't know about that one.
I suppose you'd have to give it Donald, give him one more slagging after all
I'll
the
give
work.
one whack at it anyway.
Does ketchup go in the fridge or outside the fridge?
Outside the fridge.
Outside the fridge. Would you like to live forever or have the power of invisibility?
Power of invisibility.
Do you eat soup or drink it?
Oh, you eat soup.
And what is the one thing in the world that annoys you the most?
Leaving the toothpaste without the cap on.
I thought you were going to say DJs that leave their gear there until the next morning.
No.
Fionnbar, thank you so much for doing this. I'm forever a friend in me forever, if that means anything to you. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll keep in touch. And once again, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll do all we can to
No bother. Just one thing to tell you, that starting with COVID, the lockdown happened on the 18th of March, I believe, wasn't it? Yeah, so no, the 16th of March.
16th, we closed. 15th.
We closed everything on the 16th of March. And on the 17th of March, I had 9 cigarettes left. And I spaced them out over the day. And I haven't smoked one since. I'm still after them.
Fair play to you, boy. That's a challenge and a half, isn't it?
There's one.
So you've gone through 0 in the kitchen. You've gone through giving up the cigarettes. You've gone through lockdown, and you're still married. That's enough right there.
If she hasn't got rid of me now, she'll never get rid of me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir, so much for doing this. Thank you so much for doing this. There you have it, guys. Fionbarr Walsh, father of the late Donal Walsh. Absolute mind-boggling story. Like I said at the start, it was going to be a touchy podcast, and it definitely was. Thank you so much for everybody who listened. I really, really appreciate everything you've said. And we'll catch you again soon. And don't forget, guys, tell somebody you love them, because you never know. So that's our tagline on everything. Tell somebody you love them. And until next time, guys, good night and God bless.
Frozen in this moment, the last, and I know it. Think about the winners with hands with the coldest. Think about hand out, shit, you're still growing. Think about the world, how we didn't even notice. We became